Hello, welcome to Secure the Continent with me, Gbenga Aborowa. This is the show where we bring you all the security situations across the continent. But before we delve into today's major discussion, here are the major security headlines across the continent. Our massacre, death toll hits 40, and the Ondo state government has revealed. Military police killed in Western Cameroon. Algeria suspends Spain treaty over Western Sahara dispute. And Tanzanian peacekeepers injured in DR Congo clashes. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. 5 Cameroon military police were killed in an attack on Tuesday night in the western region of Cameroon, bordering a province where separatists are fighting for breakaway state, the regional governor said on Wednesday. The attack took place in Temitope in the district of Kouoptamo in the West French-speaking region, bordering the 2 Anglophone regions where rebels have been fighting against the French-speaking majority state since 2017. The fight has killed more than 3,000 people and displaced nearly 1 million with atrocities committed by both sides. We have more details for you in this package.
Since 2017, the people of the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon have been battling a crisis, now known as the Amazonian War or the Southern Cameroonian Civil War. Since it started, the conflict has left at least 4,000 people dead and more than 700,000 people have been displaced. First viewed as a clash of interest, it has now grown into a full-blown war. Depending on who you ask, some say it is a war for better recognition, a war against marginalization, or war for self-determination. The French-speaking Cameroonian government has arrested those pushing for an Amazonian republic to come from the conflict, but this has not done much to quell the violence. The conflict seems to be fueled by the hunger for freedom and control, and until the actors come to the table to settle their differences, hundreds of Cameroonians will continue to pay the price.
Now, joining me live on Secure the Continent today to discuss the crisis in the Amazonian region of Cameroon is David Otto, an international defense and security specialist, as well as Temitope Olodo, the president of the African Security Forum. Gentlemen, welcome to Secure the Continent.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'd like to start with David. What's the genesis of this never-ending conflict between Cameroon's military and separatist forces from the 2 Anglophone regions in the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon?
Gbenga, thank you for having me. And thank you for co-partnering myself with Mr. Temitope Olodo. I think the genesis of this conflict or crisis, as some would prefer to call it, or war, it's down to the fact that during the decolonization process, the western part of Cameroon, which of course comprises of the current day, 2 regions known as the Northwest and the Southwest region, purely English-speaking regions. They say that the decolonization was not properly done. Therefore, that, they were supposed to have their independence, from the eastern part, which is now today's the rest of the 8 regions, of current day Cameroon. So the conflict was, down to marginalization and the fact that, the Anglophones, as they call them, because of course they are of the English descent, then former colony of Great Britain, they say that they want to have their independence, because they do not see themselves as being accepted into the whole entire French, Cameroon system. So this whole crisis has been ongoing since the Declaration of Independence, in 1961, alongside the then northern part of Nigeria, northern Cameroon, which joined Nigeria after the February 11 referendum of 1961. So I think it's very crucial to understand that historical part. But crucially, this current conflict began with the 2016 riots, which was principally much a civil protest by lawyers and teachers against the use of French language in English region, but also the fact that the lawyers argued that the French system of law was not applicable to the English part of Cameroon. And of course, the military retaliated brutally, and this led to those who were on the extremist side taking to the streets and demanding for an outright independence on the basis that they couldn't live together with, or they cannot live together with their French counterparts. So this crisis has been going on for a very long time, as you know, now 5 years or almost 6 years into being. Both sides are engaging in massive, insurgency style of fighting each other, a horizontal warfare between the military and the separatist forces. It has resulted in kidnappings of high-profile individuals. It has led to arson on villages. It has led to high displacement of people.
Okay.
We've seen cases of schools by the separatists, but also accusing the government targeting schools in region. The military forces have gone beyond the rules of engagement. They've been.
Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties with David, but let's move to Temitope. So Temitope, David has given us the historical perspective, and now we've seen how what started off as a demonstration in 2016 has snowballed into an armed conflict. Now, these separatists describe themselves as a movement for the restoration of the Republic of Ambazonia. What are the reasons for their call for an independent state and a separation from Cameroon? How do they hope to achieve this?
I think starting from where Dr. Otto has brilliantly, placed it, the agitation more or less was because of the uniqueness of Cameroon as a country, the only country at least in Africa with two major, the English and French, there are French-speaking people. And it's important to highlight for our viewers that this country, just like Nigeria, has over 270 ethnic languages that are spoken within the country. This triangle-style country, have been facing a lot of challenges since 1961. But it got to the climax on the 1st of October 2017, when the separatists decided to, call for independence because of the fact that they believe they've been marginalized. And it's not just a belief. It's a system that you could see that most of them are not actually being really recognized properly. And you have a country where you have a leader that has been ruling now for 40 years, since it's been ruling since 1982. The old man is 89 years old, the oldest, at least if not the oldest leader in Africa. So the combination of all these is what we are witnessing that have resulted in more than 6,000 people that have been killed. Now, the population in the southwest and northwest of Cameroon have been caught in between, the rock and the devil, because as we are now, there is, a situation which, people in Nigeria could familiarize themselves with, which is happening in Southeast, where people are not meant to go out of their houses at specific days, maybe on a Monday. If you go out, you'll be killed by those people. If the government officials feel like you are not supporting them, you're also, in a difficult situation. And we and many of us, security analysts like Mr. Otto, have highlighted horribly of the account of atrocities that is happening in this area. So why it is right to say that there are grievances that need to be resolved. I think one of the challenges I have as a security analyst is that I've not seen a lot of international attention on this matter to my satisfaction, or seen what we could say a kind of a mediation to try and find a political solution to this current crisis. And that is where I have a challenge.
Sorry, Temitope, if I can follow up on what you just said now. We've seen the videos, we've seen how horrific this conflict is, and it's one that has been raging for so long. So what do you think is responsible for the little media and international coverage that it gets? Is the Cameroonian government paying lobbyists not to talk about it? Why does the world not talk about this conflict that has been raging since 2017?
I think this conflict is different from every other conflict in Africa. And I know my brother will agree with me. It's different because we're talking of two different areas that have different views, different cultures. So it's not a matter of just ethnicity alone. It's a matter of the fact that one is English speaking, the other one is French, is English speaking, one is French speaking, and the way they see themselves, they see that the policy and structure does not align. But I think where the separatists have missed it is that they are inflicting more harm on their own people than even the government of the day is doing to the people, because they cut off arms. Like, in the last few hours, an hospital was set ablaze. More than 45, patients in that hospital have to be evacuated. The horror is being felt by the people. If you are fighting for the people, the people should feel like you are fighting for them.
You shouldn't oppress them.
You shouldn't oppress them. They're asking children, they're asking people not to go to school, and for boys to come and join them in the fight. So many people are exiting. I know families that are now in Abuja as we speak, who have moved their children to private school in Abuja. I know people that have moved their family and loved ones that have moved out of Cameroon into Nigeria territory to escape the onslaught that is happening, because it's not just the military that is oppressing them, but it's their own people that is oppressing them and forcing them to pay money. And that's the reason why we are speaking to people in the southeast also, that look at the example just across the border of what is happening there. If you allow this thing to get out of hand of what is happening in the southeast of Nigeria, it will more or less just snowball into what is happening in Cameroon now.
Thank you, Temitope. Now back to you, David. We've heard Temitope's accounts of this rebel groups. Are there factions and are there different rebel groups fighting for the independence of Ambazonia? And do they all take orders from a central command? What's their modus operandi?
Yes, thank you very much, Gbenga, and I do apologize for the internet issues here to your audience. You're very correct that these so-called, separatist groups, have different factions. And one of the biggest issues in terms of when we talk about the possibility of having negotiations is that there are various factions that have various leaders. So first of all, you have, the separatist groups, that these are the people who believe that there should be an outright independence. They form, part of a particular faction. Then you've got people who believe that independence is not the solution. They call themselves the federalists. So they think that, the best solution to the crisis is to have a two-state federation. And this
like
is
like an autonomous region sort of?
Yeah,
or is
so
it more
for example,
than that?
so that would be an autonomous region. And this is backed by the fact that before 1972, the southern part of Cameroon signed, to become part of the French Cameroon as a federal system. And it was made very clear that the federation should not be tampered with. So after 1972, when that was changed, you then had people who were clamoring. So that's one faction that clamored for the restoration of the federal system, something that we have in Nigeria, where you have different states being governed by their chief security officers, known as their governors.
Yes.
So that system, was demolished and somehow created what now is a unity state. And I think the Anglophones are saying that they want to go back to that system of federation. So that's the other
sorry to interrupt you there,
yes,
David. When this system was demolished, was it under Paul Biya's government or Ahmadou Ahidjo?
Yeah, so this was under the previous administration of the late Ahmadou Ahidjo. Paul Biya, as my colleague rightly said, came to power in 1982. That is after the federal system had been abolished. So, of course, there are some factions, to go back to the initial question, that are clamoring to return back to that federation system. They are being overpowered, to use that word, by the
Okay, we seem to have connection problems with David. We'll get back to him shortly. Now, Temitope, rights group Amnesty International said the militants have also committed atrocities on both sides. Apart from killing members of security forces, they've also carried out attacks designed to strike fear amongst the population. You did mention in passing hacking of limbs and all of that, going as far as burning down schools and targeting teachers who did not enforce the boycott. Amnesty International said this in a report. What are the local sentiments on the ground? Ordinary citizens of Cameroon that live in the northwest and the southern region, are they in support of this secessionist armed struggle?
It's quite interesting the way you put it, because I think it's important to highlight, just like David Otto was mentioning earlier, there was a unilateral referendum that took place on the 20th of May 1972, and that was 10 years before the present administration came into place. The people generally agree with that ideology of having this pure federalism, which is the same thing that your Nigerian viewers really align with, asking for return back to the 1963 Constitution in Nigeria. The problem we have now is that we have a separatist group that have become so drunk in their annoyance and vengeance that they actually go after the people who actually agree with them philosophically with their calling, just like the Biafra agreement with the Biafra, but they do not agree with you come and kill them, when they are going to get a PVC. So we could see the deja vu that is happening both in the two countries that are just beside each other.
Pattern.
Yeah, there's a pattern. So the problem here is that the people ideologically agree with the fact that there should be a two-state, a pure federalism, where they could rule themselves and, at least enjoy the fact that they are Anglo-speaking and, enjoy all the benefits. But you now have a separatist group which has now been hijacked by a different group, as Dr. David Otto has highlighted. And as a result, who are we going to engage with? Who is the government going to talk to? Because there are so many criminals that have hijacked the process and going into people's homes, dragging them out in the middle of the night and saying they support, the government, and as a result, cutting their limbs and even going into a farm and cutting the limbs and say, we're not killing you, we're just sending a message out. So the fear has been put into the population. And that is why we're saying in Nigeria, again, as I highlighted, that people need to know, and that's why I'm happy with this kind of program, because what you're doing is highlighting what is happening, across the border, so people could see what happens when you allow, the not using legitimate democratic process to to address grievances.
And when those grievances are not addressed too, and
then it becomes a problem.
Yes. So,
Exactly.
yes, I'll let you continue. Temitope.
Okay. So as a result, I totally agree with what the Amnesty International have been talking about, and other NGOs who have highlighted, the fact that at least over 712,000 people have been, have been displaced as a result of what is happening. The whole of, the other part of Nigeria, like the Cross River and the other areas in the southeast, south, have been, have taken in a lot of refugee from Cameroon. But not only that, the insecurity in this area is also affecting Nigeria and also affecting Cameroon, because these guys now, like you rightly highlighted during your intro, it has now become a war. It's not just a conflict. It's not just a mere conflict. The kind of weapons that these individuals are using. But the extrajudicial killing by the military, and the lack of democratic practices is not helping to reduce the tension in this area. And that's the reason why I am really concerned, just like my colleagues are concerned, that we need to find a political solution to this issue that is going. And it's quite a shame that Nigeria as a big brother have not been able to intervene to say, okay, let's use Nigeria as a safe zone for these two groups to come, for both parties to come and have a discussion and actually find a political situation.
Thank you very much, Temitope. Now, David, looking at this conflict, the basic responsibility and very important responsibility of governments all across the world is to protect the lives and property of its citizens. Now, these separatists, regardless of what region in the country they're in, the Cameroonian government has a responsibility to protect the people in the Anglophone regions. Now, how have these separatists managed to keep the fighting going after all this years, since 2017? What is the source of their funding? And would you say it's an indictment on Cameroonian security forces not to have been able to win this militarily, knowing that they're quite stretched, because there's also a conflict with Boko Haram in the northern part of Cameroon?
I think you've got to go back to, the main reason why this conflict has been dragging on for long, and that is the fact that, irrespective of the inclusion of the extremists, there is a lot of belief from the English-speaking regions that there is a legitimate reason to have this kind of an incursion against the government. Now, some other commentators will tell you that there is also a very strong call for some kind of a federal state. But even if that were the case, what we see is that the government has failed to either restore the federal system that a lot of some of the Anglophones have been calling for a very long time. They've also failed to have a complete decentralization of power. So power still rests entirely in the hands of Yaoundé. And that means even those who are calling for non-violent action against the government, do not have a very strong argument, because of course the government has been very slow and has backed down in terms of implementing any form of decentralization or any form of a federal system, some kind of a system whereby the English-speaking parts of the country would have, some autonomy in terms of how they carry out the education system, the legal system. So there is a lot of support behind closed doors, both back in Cameroon, but also in the diaspora, in terms of these, conflict, the selection of violence by the separatist groups. A lot of people are supporting them because, of course, the government has created a loophole. They failed to address some of these issues. But what you've got to understand also is that, the government is also divided in terms of how it wants to approach the situation. Some members of the government believe that, they should be given some level of autonomy. Others, are very, very resilient, to any concessions. And they believe that the military can crush the separatist groups. But of course, with the kind of knowledge we have, that is going to be very impossible. Because,
you can't shoot your way out of a conflict, yes.
Yeah, so the group has a very deep level of support, within local communities. Now, this could be attained through people feeling that, they are really marginalized, or maybe by coercion. The group is known to, some of these separatist groups are known to use very drastic measures to, force the local population to support them. But you cannot discount the fact that, there's a lot of people within this local population who truly believe that, they should have some level of independence, or if not independence, in totality of what the separatists are asking for. I think the biggest, issue here, Gbenga, is that the government has completely, been on kind of a double lane, in the sense that, while one side of, the state believes, or individuals within the state believes this could be resolved through the barrel of the gun, there are other people who are very, very strong in believing that, this can only be negotiated. But the government, of course, says they do not negotiate with what they call terrorists. But of course, the current status quo is that neither the government nor the separatists, can claim full control of this area. So it's at a stalemate. And as my brother said, this is one of the most neglected crises, in the continent.
Sorry to interrupt you, David. Do these separatists hold territory, or are the attacks hit and run?
Yeah. So what they do is that, so there's a difference between controlling a territory and being present in a particular territory. So, because of the vastness of some of the areas where they operate within, they have some level of coverage, because of course these are not governed spaces. So it's difficult to say that they are controlling those territories, because control means, some level of governance. You provide basic necessities, but that is not the case. They may provide some level of what they call protection to local population, but this is not guaranteed. So, for example, in the real sense of control, they cannot actually deny access to the military to go to areas where the military wants to go to. Now, the military can go there, but they may have, to clash with the separatists. So they do not actually, at this point in time, control territories. They have small pockets of locations where they operate.
Okay.
They are very mobile, using the guerrilla tactics. They use ambush tactics to disrupt the military's movement. But I will not describe, the hold that they have within those areas as some form of control, because of course that's a very different ballgame altogether.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Temitope. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll be looking at solutions and mediation efforts to end this conflict in Cameroon's Anglophone-speaking regions. This is Secure the Continent. Welcome back to Secure the Continent. We've been discussing the crisis in the Anglophone-speaking regions of Cameroon, and I still have here with me David Otto, International Defense and Security Specialist, as well as Temitope Olodo, the President of African Security Forum. Now, I'd like to ask Temitope, I did remember you mentioned the shutdown of schools, attacks on universities has happened. Why is this a tactic of the separatist group? What do they aim to achieve with this shutdown of schools? Because it has serious implications on the education of those children and those studying in the Anglophone speaking areas. And does this, using this tactic, does it delegitimize their struggle?
Actually, I believe that when you have a legitimate concern, you could use all means that is non-violent to express your displeasure with government. So if part of it is saying, you know, we're going to one day protest legitimately, just like trade union, to say we're not going to come out, so that you could know that we are really not happy with the way in which we are ruled. There is nothing, for me personally, I don't have a problem with that if there is no violence involved. The problem with this is that it snowballs and people hijacking, like we're seeing in the southeast again of Nigeria, where, you know, they sit at home, which was initially seen as a way of protesting to the Nigerian government to say we're not happy with the way in which the southeast is treated, is now turned and hijacked by criminals who have now used it as a weapon to actually inflict wound on the population itself. And it's important to highlight, even though we said there have not been any major mediation, it's important to highlight that in September 2019, actually, the president called on TV for a grand national dialogue to resolve, you know, this conflict in the country. But the opposition were not really happy with it because there were a lot of separatist leaders that were still in the prison. And of course, what you expect is that if you're calling for a kind of a mediation, you should get those people involved. And the president, Paul Baye, actually went on to dismiss all mediation efforts put forward by the United Nations, by African Union, and even the Catholic Church. And it's important that most of the policies that he brought on board, which is, you know, all these bilingual and decentralization in Cameroon policies, were rejected as window dressing. So I think what is important is that people were not carried along, and there are ways in which you could do things which are legitimate. And that's the reason why I'm saying countries like Nigeria, that are actually a big country within, you know, within Africa, and South Africa, and some other countries could have actually pressed home on, you know, President Paul Biya to say, okay, you know what, we need to find a local solution to this issue, even if you are not ready to, you know, accept it.
You mentioned Nigeria playing a big brother part in the mediation efforts, and I'm sure you're very aware that Nigeria is actually embroiled in its own security issues. There are serious conflicts happening in Nigeria that needs to be addressed. We even have our own separatist struggle too that the government is dealing with. But I want to, just before I move to David Temitope, I want to ask you this question, because we've seen an escalation in conflicts recently. There's hardly any week that passed by in the last 1 month that there haven't been attacks in the Anglophone region. And it's a good time to look, where did we stop the last time with mediation efforts? What's the current situation?
We know we have 120 days to go to, you know, to the day, the 1st of October. That is the declaration by the separatist group. So if they've sharpen up their weapons and decide to start more conflict or to create more tension, then this is what is normally expected to happen. You know, this group could go into hiding and come out, you know, when they believe that they have an opportunity, you know, to inflict wounds. As you could see, they went after killing 5 military police officers, like you highlighted in your intro, and today we noticed that an hospital was set on fire. Yes. I think there is need for a joint operation between, you know, when you look at these countries, Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, the only solution is when these countries come together to fight a common enemy. And I'm not saying that we need to kill off the separatist ideology. I think what is important is to come up with a superior ideology to fight that. And it's not just about war. It's about coming up with initiative that brings these people to the table, so that when you are able to show that, okay, we have offered a kind of a solution to this crisis, and these people are not taking it on board, then it's easy to turn the people against them, because even the people are tired of the separatists. And if they could have their way, they want the separatists, they want a reset. They would like a reset to this whole issue, so that they could go back to the beginning and say, okay, you know what we want is a true federalism where we also have independence, just like Dr. Otto mentioned earlier, where we're able to govern ourselves and able to improve ourselves and put in policies that recognize that we're English-speaking aspect, not that you're importing French-speaking people to come and govern over us. So it's those kind of things. But there will be no political solution. There will be no solution except there is a political solution to this issue, to this conflict.
Thanks, Temitope. Now, David, still talking mediation efforts. Temitope did mention the local effort by people in Cameroon to try to address this conflict. Now, the United Nations Security Council, in what is dubbed as the historic deliberation, held a 2-hour area formula meeting on the 13th of May 2019 on the security and humanitarian catastrophe situation in northwest and southwest Cameroon. What other international efforts have been made to mediate and find a solution to this conflict? Because if that effort worked, we won't be here discussing this today.
Yes, Gbenga, I think you're right. The United Nations, unfortunately has been reduced to a humanitarian organization. They have had several challenges in terms of resolving these kinds of conflict proactively, or perhaps even preventing them. In the case of the Cameroon conflict with the Ambazonian separatists, unfortunately, the separatists, they see or they consider the United Nations as, to blame, for the decolonization process, as I mentioned earlier.
Because of the plebiscite in 74,
yes, yes, in 1970. That's when the 1961 plebiscite, which of course did not include the option for the British Southern Cameroon to be independent. So that process has been blamed on the UN. So the UN is not seen by any of
Hello, David, are you there? Okay, I think we lost David there, but I would like him to finish up on his thoughts. But before we get back to David, Temitope, this conflict has been raging for too long, and you've described some of the horrors of this, of what has been happening in the southwest and northwest region of Cameroon. Now, can you kindly tell us some of the humanitarian consequences of this conflict, and how has it affected Cameroon and the people that live in the Anglophone regions?
The conflict is not just affecting Cameroon alone, but it's affecting, the neighboring countries. Like we know quite well that even the directive, what we call travel notice that is given out by the British government highlights quite clearly that 40 kilometers into CAR, should not be a place that British citizens should go to. The far north should not be a place that the British citizens like myself should even venture into, because some of these areas are areas where there's high kidnapping. Chad, there's a problem with Chad, towards the border of Chad, 40 kilometers into Chad. Nigeria also, we know, is a route where weapons have been smuggled into Cameroon. And now what we are saying is that a lot of people have been displaced. Close to 1 million have been displaced, and many more, because we're just talking of those that have been recorded. We're not talking of those that are already living in countries like Nigeria, those that are rich people that have moved to Nigeria, move to, to Chad or move to other countries, but we know that because some of the countries around Cameroon also have their own challenges, like the Boko Haram in the northeast of Nigeria, and the religious problem in the CAR. Those are also helping to fuel and align these ungoverned spaces and weapons that are flowing in. That is the reason why it's going to be very, very difficult to deal with this conflict, by using just the kinetic approach only. You need to have non-kinetic approach to deal with this, which is a political solution. And I think it's high time that the president needs to accept that there is need for a wider consultation, a wider joint country approach to this solution. Number one, if you could have a military solution which will involve other countries, so that these separatists could be boxed in a way that we kill their ability to be able to move freely and get weapons
and carry out attacks.
Yes, and then you have a political situation where you open a political window for a political solution to say, okay, here is a solution for you, but if you don't accept this, Nigeria is blocking you, Chad is blocking you, ACR is blocking you, so that you people can actually move out. We know that the Nigerian government helped to extradite some of their leaders.
So they don't have safe havens to operate.
Yes, and once that safe haven is not there, and there's a political solution window that is open for them, then there is that opportunity for them to come to the table for a solution, a political solution to this crisis.
Now, Temitope, finally, before we let you go, the conflict in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon is deadlocked, as we can see. There's no dialogue between Yaoundé and the separatists, who are both refusing to give ground, like you highlighted during the course of the program. The government is counting on a military victory, but you said, you can't shoot your way out of a conflict. They have to take a kinetic and non-kinetic method in addressing this conflict. So my question is this: what is the pathway to peace, since the separatists are demanding independence and nothing, and the government is not ready to give it?
I think there is a middle ground. The middle ground is that the government could come up. There could be a kind of I mentioned earlier, after the 1960 independence issue, where there was this unilateral referendum, and as we mentioned earlier, there was the option of them becoming a separate nation was not actually given to them. I think what should happen, just like again in Nigeria, is to say, okay, we have a 10-year plan. The government doesn't need to say, oh, we're accepting everything.
Yes.
No, now. There could be a 10-year plan to say, okay, let's spread this out over a 10-year period and say, okay, you want your own people, that you want an opportunity for your own people to rule in your own area. Okay, let's create a governor. Let's create a regional structure where you could have a devolution of power, where you could have control over your budget on education, control over your budget on housing, control over your budget. If you could give them little to chip in a little bit of that, and say that in the next 10 years we could actually have a referendum to see if you are still interested in leaving and exiting Cameroon.
And then have timelines and landmarks that you can always refer to monitor the progress of those concessions they've given.
Exactly. And you could say there will be an amnesty. Okay, there have been a problem here. Let's create an amnesty where people who are ready to drop down their weapons will be able to, because again, remember, this is what, for our viewers back home, this is where, just like the South-South militant challenges in Nigeria, where you don't have a religious crisis, where this is just an ethnic crisis, you could easily kill this whole issue, could die off within a year, and there will be no conflict if only we could put in a template to say these are opportunities for you. And we've seen it work in the south side of Nigeria. Of course, what have been done by the government is to give them control over their area and allow them to be able to use, part of the money that is coming out of that area, to develop the area. If you do that in that area, I'm confident that some of these things will slow down gradually and peace will return to the area, because this is not a religious war that we're dealing with. When it's a religious war, it's difficult to stamp out. But when you are dealing with issues to do with independence and opportunities like that, it is possible to actually find a solution to it.
I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Temitope, Olodo, and David Otto, for your time and contribution to the program. I did appreciate your insights and candor.
Thank you very much for having me.
There you have it. Now, the Cameroonian and international actors should encourage both sides to make concessions by threatening to sanction those who stand in the way of dialogue and rewarding the less intransigent. And then the conflict will eventually require changes in the legal framework for decentralization to grant a greater autonomy to communes and regions. Until next time, on Secure the Continent, I'm Gbenga Aborowa.